Okay, this is the video for the final portion of information in Chapter 6. This should be the last video that you will need in order to help you prepare for the exam. And this portion of the video is going to take a look at Paul Revere and the Midnight Ride and the battles of Lexington and Concord. Here on the picture in front of us, we have kind of like a picture of Paul Revere and William Dawes that I thought was kind of comical, because instead of riding their horses through the countryside and warning the people, the countryside, that the British are coming, they were choosing to post it onto Facebook and William Dawes. You have to wonder if today that is how we would warn the countryside if something bad was happening, if we would use social networking sites. These guys were the social networkers of Massachusetts in 1775, and they did that by horse, by word of mouth. They were going to travel through the countryside and warn them. Now, what's interesting here, and what the picture gets wrong, is that these two fellas, as they rode through the countryside, they would not be shouting, "The British are coming, the British are coming," because they lived in the British colonies. They considered themselves to be British or Englishmen. They more likely would be saying something along the lines of "the Redcoats are coming" or "the regulars are coming." Because if they said "the British are coming," it would be like saying, "Hey, we're coming," which would be weird and inaccurate. So, if they were warning the countryside, they would definitely be saying "the regulars" or "the Redcoats." Now, Revere and Dawes, they were part of an extensive spy network that the Patriots had established. You know, it was created by the Sons of Liberty to spy on the British. And they had spies that were close to them in Boston, right there in the harbor, so that they could keep an eye on what these Redcoats were doing, and what their plans were, and give signals to others. Likewise, the Redcoats, as we mentioned in class, they also had people who were loyal to the crown, called loyalists, who were spying on members of the Sons of Liberty and giving information back to General Thomas Gage, who was in charge of the troops there in Boston. So the spy networks went both ways, and they gave information both ways. As far as the Sons of Liberty and these Patriots who were in Boston, they came up with a plan that they had a feeling that at some point these British soldiers were going to possibly kind of invade the inner territory outside of Boston towards Concord or Lexington, probably to come after John Hancock and Samuel Adams, because they were, again, the mouthpieces of the Revolution, and they kind of felt like if they could capture them and shut them up, everybody else would calm down and chill out, and things might go back to normal. So, in order to be prepared for that, what they had done is the Sons of Liberty and the other Patriots, they began kind of doing like informal military training. You got to remember, these guys were farmers and they were blacksmiths and they had regular jobs, and then in the evening time they would kind of gather and form these small militias where they would march up and down and practice marching and giving orders and things like that in during their free time. Revere and Dawes, their part of the plan is that whenever they got the signals that the British were coming inward, that they would head off and alert these Minutemen, or the farmers and people like that who lived in the countryside, who could be prepared at a moment's notice that the British were coming, so that they could gather and protect their towns and villages. Now, the signals that were set up were going to go in the Old North Church in Boston. They were going to be up in the steeple. And the plan was if the British had attempted to kind of invade the area by land, they would put one lamp up in the steeple. The riders, who were on the other side of the harbor, on the mainland area, they would see the one lamp. They would know that the troops were moving by land, which would give the riders a little bit more time, because the route by land is a little bit longer, that they could get into the countryside and warn everybody and say, hey, they're coming by land, we've got a little bit of time, but we need to get into our strategic areas. If they were going to come by sea, that was going to be a little bit quicker route, and the plan was to put 2 lamps in the steeple if they were going to come by sea. On the evening of April 19th, actually the early morning, just after midnight, April 19th, 1775, Thomas Gage decided to order around 800 of his finest regulars inland in order to, number 1, capture Samuel Adams and John Hancock. That was their number 1 objective, the most important thing they were after. And number 2, they were going to march all the way into Concord, which is about a 20-mile hike, and there they would destroy any weapons that had been amassed there. They had got some intelligence that said that there were going to be some weapons in Concord, and they were going to go there and destroy them. So number 1, the most important thing they were after was Samuel Adams and John Hancock. Number 2, they are after to destroy the weapons. When Paul Revere and William Dawes, who were both set to ride that evening, get the signal that they are coming by sea, they take off in 2 different directions. And you can really see that here. This is a good map to demonstrate where these guys are heading from, the different directions. You can see the green path on our map. That is the path that William Dawes will take, heading through Roxbury and Brookline across the Charles River into Cambridge, and just warning everybody all along the way. The regulars are coming. The regulars are coming. We've got to get your guns, get together, and we're gonna, kind of giving them information where to meet. He wanted to get to Lexington really quick because he wanted to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock before they could be captured. Likewise, Paul Revere, who is over near Charleston, he is the blue path on our map here. He is going to be doing the same thing, crossing the Mystic River up northward, kind of northwest into Medford, and then he will come back southwest, where he will meet up with Dawes near what is Arlington, and they would travel on. Now, along the way, Revere and Dawes were both stopped along the way. At one point, Dawes, he runs, kind of jumps over. Dawes, he has to leap over a small wall to get away. Revere is going to be kind of pulled over and detained for a short while, and he kind of convinces the sentries who detain him that they're going to be under attack in a short matter of time. They get very scared when some gunfire goes off, and they let him go on his merry way and continue on. Now, both Revere and Dawes are going to make it pretty darn close to Lexington. In fact, they'll both actually make it into Lexington, and by the time they get there, Hancock and Adams are both already in hiding. They're gone, they're hiding, so they don't have to worry about being captured. Now these men are going to ride on to Concord. It's going to be on the road to Concord that the 2 of them are going to be stopped. But luckily, a 3rd rider is going to pick up right around that time. His name is Dr. Samuel Prescott. He was actually, that evening, he was out on a date, and was kind of returning home when all of this started to shake out. He is going to join the ride, and Prescott is actually going to be the only one, maybe not the only one, he's going to be the first one to make it into Concord and warn the people who are there in Concord. Revere will eventually make it into Concord, but it's not till several hours later. Dawes will be detained, and he will never make it into Concord, although he will be just fine in the end. Okay. By about 6 a.m. on the morning of April 19th, 1775, Thomas Gage and his men, about 800 of his men, actually Gage wasn't there, but 800 of Gage's men, his finest men, arrive there in Lexington. When they get to Lexington, they come face to face with Captain John Parker's militia. Parker's militia is made up of about 70 guys. Again, these are farmers. These are just regular people. They have regular jobs. They're not trained soldiers. In fact, our picture here that's in the upper left-hand side of Parker and his men, it's probably way inaccurate, because most of these men that were with Parker's militia, they wouldn't even have their own firearms. Many of them were equipped with pitchforks and different farming tools that they had kind of just grabbed on their way out the door, so that they had some type of weapon. So we've got about 70 of Captain John Parker's men. They're ready to defend their rights there. It's a dangerous endeavor, especially against these trained soldiers, these guys who have been fighting forever, but they were ready for it. They were under orders. Both sides, Parker's men as well as the Redcoats, were under orders not to fire unless fired upon first. As the regulars approached, they approached with their drums and their fifes and everything else. They were probably very intimidating. Their muskets were loaded and their bayonets were attached. They formed up into their lines, into formation, about 50 yards away from these militia members. The British officers were in front. They were on horseback, and they were really attempting to just kind of like settle everybody down, calm everybody down. The officers ordered the militia to lay down their arms and to go home. Now, Captain Parker, who was kind of seen here up on our upper left-hand side with the green jacket on, he realizes that 70 are not going to be able to take on 800. It's not a good situation. He is severely outnumbered, and he orders his men to disperse and not fire. As his men turn and begin leaving, a gunshot goes off. We don't know who fired. We have a guess that it might have been an accident, that it was one of the militia members who were very nervous upon seeing this, fierce fighting force of the Redcoats. Somebody's gun went off, and the rank and file of the regulars thought that they were being fired upon. They were itching for a chance to act forcibly against these rebels. They had been taking abuse for months and months and months. They really couldn't wait to get back at these guys. They spontaneously opened fire, all of them. When the smoke cleared, after, a few volleys, 8 of the 70 colonists were dead. There were several others who were wounded. They had went and hid. Some just laid down and just kind of laid there. There was only one regular that was wounded in response. The British officers very quickly got people in order. They ordered their men back into formation, and they began continued on marching towards Concord in order to complete their mission of destroying any weapons that were in Concord. Again, we take a look at a map here, very similar to the one that we had with the Midnight Ride, and it shows us the path that the British soldiers took from Boston all the way up into Lexington and then into Concord. It's about 7:30 in the morning when these troops arrive in Concord, and when they get to the city is pretty much deserted. There's nobody to be found there. There are no weapons there. Nothing to be found. In fact, the only thing that they find is kind of the wooden shell that you use to put a cannon on top of to move it around. That's about all they find. Whenever they get there, the officer in charge of the British soldiers orders that wooden shell be burnt. They're kind of just standing around trying to make heads or tails of the situation, where everybody is, and try to figure things out. The colonists were actually on the hillside surrounding Concord, kind of hiding and watching down below what was happening. When one of the colonists sees smoke coming up from the town of Concord, he gets very nervous and screams, "Hey, they're setting our town on fire," and he wants to take matters in their own hand. So they begin kind of dispersing and heading down towards Concord. There's going to be a confrontation at Concord. There's going to be an exchange of some gunfire. And the British troops, both sides are going to kind of hold their own, but the British troops are going to leave the battlefield. They're going to retreat, which means as soon as they retreat, it's an American victory because they left the scene of the battle. Now, as they retreat, something interesting starts to happen at this point. All of these people who have been warned from the countryside, they start to head in, and let me just kind of draw a little bit on here so you can get a real good example of it. All of the Minutemen who had been warned by Revere and Dawes and Prescott from the countryside and by the church bells that were ringing, they all begin to descend on this road that the British soldiers are marching on. And what they're going to do is they're going to hide behind trees. They are going to begin to open fire, kind of sniper fire, on these British soldiers. At first, it's sporadic, but then, by the time things are said and done, we have about 4,000 Minutemen that come out of that countryside and just line that road. And these British soldiers, they are going to be hightailing it back towards Lexington as quick as possible and not in an orderly fashion. And they are going to take many, many casualties. Now, by the time they get back to Lexington, just south of Lexington, where the initial battle took place, which is right here on the map, they are going to meet up with some reinforcements of about 1,000 soldiers and a couple cannons. At that point, they're going to be able to kind of slow down, get back into formation, and defend themselves, and have a more orderly retreat back to Boston. They are going to go all the way back to where they began from, where their camps are in Boston. And these Minutemen, these soldiers that have chased them back, they are going to line the hillsides and surround the hillsides above Boston and kind of almost blockade these soldiers in. And that's where they will remain for several months until we kind of have our first major battle, the Battle of Bunker Hill, right outside of Boston. That pretty much ends the information for Chapter 6. Hopefully these videos were helpful.